I used to believe the saddest sound in Chicago was a police siren fading into the night. I was wrong. It was the silence that came after the last customer left. Midnight settled over the city like a heavy coat. Neon signs reflected across rain-soaked pavement while musicians packed away their instruments one by one. The jazz club emptied slowly, leaving behind half-finished conversations, forgotten perfume, and glasses still carrying fingerprints of strangers who would never think about this place again. People knew me as Sebastian Knight. Some called me a businessman. Others preferred darker titles. None of them mattered tonight. I wasn't there for dinner. I was waiting for a meeting that had already been delayed twice. Control had become my favorite addiction. Every schedule. Every contract. Every conversation. If something slipped beyond my reach, I fixed it before anyone noticed. Or I paid enough money that nobody asked questions. That's how I survived. That's how I convinced myself I was protecting everyone around me. The restaurant manager approached my private room. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Knight. It'll be another 20 minutes. I nodded without looking up from the financial report spread across the table. Outside the hallway, chairs scraped against hardwood floors as servers finished cleaning. Someone laughed briefly before the sound disappeared into the kitchen. Then I heard something else. Not loud. Not dramatic. Someone trying very hard not to cry. I looked toward the dining room. Near the stage, beneath a single amber pendant light, a young waitress sat alone at the last occupied table. Her uniform was immaculate despite the 14-hour shift she'd clearly endured, a tailored black fine dining dress with a crisp white collar, fitted waist apron, polished shoes, and a neatly tied ponytail that had begun to loosen around her face. Her smooth dark skin glowed softly beneath the warm lights, while tears slipped silently down her cheeks onto folded hands she desperately wanted to keep steady. She thought no one could see her. She was wrong. The manager noticed my attention. "Oh, that's Maya." His tone changed immediately. "She's emotional." The explanation irritated me. "Why?" He shrugged. "Personal problems." I stood. The manager instinctively stepped aside. People usually did. When I reached her table, Maya wiped her face quickly and stood out of habit. "I'm sorry, sir. We're closed." Not embarrassed. Professional. Even now. I placed a thick envelope on the table. "There should be enough." She stared at it. Then at me. "What is it?" "Whatever you need." For a brief second, I expected gratitude. Instead, she pushed the envelope back across the polished wood. "No." The answer caught me completely off guard. "It's not charity." "I know." "Then take it." She shook her head. "My father taught me something before he forgot almost everything else." Her voice remained calm despite the tears. "If someone offers money before asking what happened, they're trying to end the conversation." The words landed harder than any threat I'd ever received. Because she wasn't insulting me. She was describing me. The manager rushed over, clearly panicked. "Maya." He forced a nervous smile toward me. "I apologize. She's under a lot of stress." "I'm capable of speaking for myself," Maya replied quietly. His smile vanished. "Clock out." "I already did." "Then leave." Every employee in the room suddenly became interested in wiping already clean tables. Public humiliation spreads faster than gossip. Nobody spoke. Nobody helped. Maya untied her apron slowly, folded it with remarkable care, and placed it on the counter as though protecting its dignity mattered more than protecting her own. She picked up her bag and walked toward the exit. Just before she reached the door, something slipped from her sleeve onto the floor. A folded legal notice. The wind pushed it open. I caught only one sentence before she hurriedly picked it up. Final notice of property acquisition. At the bottom of the page, the acquiring company carried a familiar logo. Knight Urban Development. My company. I never remembered approving the purchase of this building. So why was my signature printed across the final page? I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the acquisition. Because of her sentence. If someone offers money before asking what happened. I had negotiated billion-dollar mergers. Ended wars between rival organizations. Bought companies before breakfast. Yet one waitress had looked me in the eye and described the flaw I'd spent half my life calling leadership. Money wasn't my solution. Control was. Money was simply the language I used to exercise it. At 7 the next morning, my executive conference room overlooked a skyline wrapped in gray clouds. Lawyers. Developers. Financial analysts. Every seat was filled. The acquisition of the Blue Note Jazz House appeared halfway through the agenda. Item 12, my chief legal officer announced. Final demolition approval. I interrupted. Why are we demolishing it? The room fell silent. Caleb Monroe, the restaurant's general manager, cleared his throat from the far end of the table. He wasn't supposed to attend board meetings, but because he had negotiated directly with the property owners, my investment division had invited him. The location is underperforming. He clicked a presentation forward. Luxury members lounge. Private gaming floor. Rooftop event space. Projected revenue filled the screen. Everyone nodded. Everyone except me. What happens to the employees? Caleb smiled politely. They'll find other work. What about the music program? Another smile. The city's full of musicians. His answers sounded efficient. Too efficient. Like a man who had practiced removing people from equations. I turned another page. My signature sat neatly beneath the approval. Perfect. Except. I never signed contracts digitally. Only with fountain pen. Always. My father had insisted. A signature should feel heavy, he used to say. If your hand never touches the paper, your conscience won't either. I quietly closed the file. Delay the demolition. Confused faces filled the room. Caleb spoke first. With respect, Mr. Knight, investors are expecting, I wasn't asking. The meeting ended 3 minutes later. For the first time in years, I left executives without explanations. Instead of returning to headquarters, I drove back to the restaurant. It was closed until dinner service. Only delivery workers and kitchen staff moved inside. Maya stood behind the bar, organizing invoices into color-coded folders. No makeup beyond the subtle professionalism she always carried. Her long softly curled hair rested over one shoulder instead of being tied up. She looked younger. And somehow stronger. She noticed me immediately. We're not open. I know. She continued sorting paperwork. I don't have much time. I delayed the demolition. Her hands stopped moving. Only for a second. Why? I have questions. So ask them. No fear. No gratitude. Just honesty. I respected that more than I wanted to admit. The notice. She sighed. My foster father lives upstairs. She pointed toward the apartments above the restaurant. He has early-stage dementia. I said nothing. He played saxophone here for 32 years. She gently stacked another folder. This is the only building he still recognizes. The room suddenly felt much smaller. If this place disappears, he'll lose the last map leading him home. No financial report had mentioned that. No valuation model had measured memory. I looked around. Photographs lined the walls. Generations of musicians. Families. Birthdays. Wedding receptions. Community fundraisers. I'd purchased a building. Without realizing I was buying people's history. Before I could answer, Caleb entered through the kitchen. His expression hardened the moment he saw us talking. Maya. His voice echoed across the empty dining room. The lunch inventory isn't finished. It will be. He ignored her and looked directly at me. I hope she isn't giving you the impression this place is irreplaceable. Maya remained calm. Caleb didn't. Interesting. I replied quietly, I'm still deciding what impression to believe. His smile tightened. As you should. He walked away. But not before slipping a small flash drive into his jacket pocket. It happened so naturally almost nobody would have noticed. Almost. Maya noticed. So did I. The moment our eyes met, we both realized we had just seen the same secret. And Caleb knew it. The moment Caleb's hand disappeared into his jacket, the room changed. Not because of the flash drive. Because he realized someone had seen it. People who carry secrets develop instincts sharper than survival. His eyes met mine for less than a second. Then shifted toward Maya. Calculating. Not frightened. That bothered me. An innocent manager would have explained. Caleb simply smiled. I'll be in my office. He walked away without waiting for an answer. The kitchen door swung shut behind him. Neither Maya nor I spoke. Finally she broke the silence. You shouldn't get involved. I already am. She slowly gathered the invoices she'd been organizing. You don't understand how people disappear around deals like this. I almost laughed. If anyone understands that, it's me. She looked directly at me. No. You understand power. You don't understand ordinary people. The distinction landed harder than I expected. I had spent years believing I protected communities. Yet I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually listened to one. That evening I returned without security. No convoy. No assistance. Just me. The restaurant was full. A local jazz quartet played softly while families celebrated birthdays and older couples danced between tables that barely had enough room. Nobody looked wealthy. Nobody looked important. Yet somehow, the room felt richer than most meetings I'd attended all year. Maya moved gracefully between tables, greeting every customer by name. She remembered favorite drinks. Allergies. Anniversaries. A little boy dropped his spoon. She knelt before anyone else reacted and made him laugh before handing him another one. She never looked rushed. She made people feel noticed. That wasn't service. It was leadership. Mine usually came with contracts. Hers came with kindness. Near closing time, an elderly man wandered slowly down the staircase from the apartment above. He carried an old saxophone case with both hands. His suit had once been elegant. Now it hung loosely from thin shoulders. His silver hair framed gentle eyes searching the room as though trying to remember a dream. Maya hurried over. Easy, Dad. I'm not your father today. He smiled apologetically. I'm Walter. That's right. She smiled back without correcting him again. I'm Maya. It's nice to meet you. The introduction broke my heart. He no longer recognized the daughter who had sacrificed years caring for him. Yet she greeted him like a new friend every single time. Walter looked toward the empty stage. Am I playing tonight? Not tonight. Oh. His disappointment lasted only seconds before memory carried it away again. I had negotiated with senators without feeling anything. Watching one old musician lose the same memory twice in 5 minutes, felt unbearable. As the final customers left, Caleb appeared carrying several accounting folders. Mr. Knight. He forced another polished smile. I've prepared every financial record you requested. Maya glanced toward the folders. Something about her expression changed. Almost imperceptibly. Concern. Not fear. She quietly excused herself to help Walter upstairs. Only after she disappeared did Caleb place the files before me. Everything is transparent. I opened the first ledger. Monthly revenue. Payroll. Maintenance. Normal. Too normal. Every page looked freshly printed. No handwritten corrections. No coffee stains. No aging. A business that had operated for 30 years somehow possessed accounting records that looked less than a week old. Original books? I asked. These are the originals. He answered too quickly. I closed the folder. I'll have my auditors compare them. For the first time that evening, his smile disappeared. When I stepped outside, rain had begun falling again. Maya stood alone beneath the restaurant's faded marquee waiting for the city bus. Before I could speak, headlights swept across the street. A black SUV slowed without stopping. Its rear window lowered just enough for someone inside to throw a sealed envelope onto the wet sidewalk. The vehicle disappeared before either of us could read the license plate. Maya picked up the envelope. Her face lost every trace of color. Inside was a single photograph. Walter playing saxophone on this very stage, taken earlier that evening. Across the bottom, someone had handwritten 6 chilling words. He remembers more than you think. I couldn't stop looking at the photograph. Walter stood on the empty stage exactly as he had only minutes earlier, one hand resting on the old saxophone case, smiling toward seats that no longer held an audience. Someone had been watching him. Not from the dining room. From somewhere close enough to know when his memory returned. Maya folded the picture before I could take it. We're leaving. It wasn't panic. It was experience. As if she'd practiced escaping long before I entered her life. I followed her upstairs to the apartment above the restaurant. The hallway smelled of old wood, coffee, and sheet music that had lived inside the walls for decades. Walter sat quietly beside the window, polishing the brass keys of his saxophone with the same careful rhythm he had probably repeated thousands of times. He looked up and smiled. Oh. His eyes rested on me. You're late. Maya froze. So he remembers you? I asked. She slowly shook her head. No. Walter pointed toward me. The club owner. Then he laughed softly. I knew you'd come after rehearsal. His smile faded almost immediately. I'm sorry. I forgot your name. Maya gently placed a blanket across his shoulders. It happens. She said it with kindness. Not resignation. I watched her adjust the blanket, straighten the framed photographs, prepare his evening medication, and quietly replace every forgotten routine without making him feel incapable. She never corrected him sharply. Never showed frustration. She protected his dignity before his memory. I had built loyalty through fear. She built it through patience. I wasn't sure which required more strength. After Walter fell asleep, Maya placed 2 mugs of untouched tea on the small kitchen table. Neither of us drank. The photograph wasn't the first one. She opened a drawer. Inside lay 4 similar envelopes. Different dates. Different pictures. Walter feeding pigeons. Walter buying flowers. Walter sitting alone in church. Each one carried a short handwritten message. He still remembers. Don't ask questions. Some songs should stay buried. My jaw tightened. Why didn't you go to the police? She gave me a tired smile. What would I tell them? That someone keeps mailing photographs of my foster father? They'd call it harassment. And they'd be right. But they wouldn't understand why. I picked up one of the photographs. Every image had been taken from a different location. Different days. Different seasons. Someone had spent months following an old musician with dementia. That wasn't intimidation. It was obsession. The next morning I ordered a full forensic review of every acquisition connected to Night Urban Development. By noon my chief financial officer entered my office carrying a sealed binder. You need to see this. The blue note hadn't been purchased directly. Ownership had passed through 5 shell companies before reaching mine. Each transaction generated consulting fees, legal commissions, brokerage payments. Millions disappeared before the final contract was signed. Someone hadn't simply wanted the building. They wanted the paper trail. Who approved these intermediaries? He hesitated. The authorizations all came from your Executive Acquisitions Committee. I chair that committee. You do. I never saw these. His silence answered everything. Someone inside my own organization had been making decisions in my name. That evening I returned to the restaurant after closing. The dining room was dark except for the stage lights. Maya stood alone, listening. No audience. No band. Only Walter. His hands trembled as he lifted the saxophone. The first note cracked. The second held. Then, suddenly, a melody filled the empty room. Beautiful. Familiar. Walter closed his eyes. For one impossible minute, the confusion disappeared. He wasn't lost anymore. He was home. As the final note faded, he opened his eyes and looked directly at me. His voice became clear. Steady. Completely unlike the frightened man I'd met before. Sebastian. Maya gasped. Walter hadn't spoken my name correctly even once. Until now. He gripped the edge of the piano. They didn't kill your father because of money. The room fell silent. They killed him. Because of what he heard in this room. Before either of us could ask another question, Walter's expression emptied. The clarity vanished. He looked around in confusion. Excuse me. Have we met before? Walter forgot my name again. He looked at me with the same polite uncertainty reserved for strangers. The man who had just uncovered the deepest wound of my life now struggled to remember why he was holding a saxophone. Maya gently rested a hand on his shoulder. Let's get some sleep. He nodded obediently. The moment his bedroom door closed, neither of us moved. Finally, Maya whispered, "That's never happened before." What? He remembered something that specific. I stared at the silent hallway. He remembered my father. No. She slowly shook her head. He remembered the night. There was a difference. Memory wasn't returning. Pieces of trauma were. The following morning, I cancelled every meeting. My executive assistant protested. The investors are expecting, they can wait. My phone rang almost immediately. Caleb. I heard you've become very interested in old stories. I've become interested in why someone forged my signature. A brief silence. Then a laugh. You always assume the biggest secret is inside the paperwork. What does that mean? You bought the building because someone wanted you to. The line went dead. No threats. No insults. Only certainty. As though the restaurant had never been the destination. Only the bait. I returned to the blue note before lunch. Not through the front entrance. Through the old musician's alley behind the building. Walter had once mentioned performers never entered through the dining room. Backstage told a different story. Dust-covered forgotten instrument cases. Yellowed concert posters curled away from brick walls. Then I noticed something unusual. Every section had been renovated except one narrow storage room beneath the stage. The padlock looked newer than everything around it. Maya found me staring at it. That room has always been locked. By who? The owner before Caleb. Has anyone gone inside? Not in years. I called a locksmith. 20 minutes later the door opened. The room was almost empty. One piano bench. Several cracked music stands. Boxes of handwritten arrangements. Nothing valuable. Until I noticed fresh scrape marks across the wooden floor. Someone had moved something recently. Together we pushed the old piano aside. A concealed trapdoor appeared beneath it. Neither of us spoke. The air changed. Cold. Still. Like a room that had been waiting decades to be opened. The staircase below led into a forgotten basement lined with soundproof walls. No furniture. No decorations. Only shelves filled with magnetic reel tapes, dated performance logs, and recording equipment from another era. Maya carefully picked up one tape. The Blue Note live sessions. Another. Private booking. Then one without a label. Just a date. 22 years earlier. The night my father died. My pulse slowed. Someone hadn't hidden money beneath this restaurant. They had hidden voices. Before we could examine anything, footsteps echoed above us. Heavy. Several people. Not customers. Not employees. Maya immediately switched off her flashlight. The basement disappeared into darkness. Voices drifted through the floorboards. Caleb's was unmistakable. I know someone came down here. Another man answered calmly. If the archive is gone, we're finished. Archive. Not recordings. Archive. That single word changed everything. The tapes weren't souvenirs. They were evidence. Maya leaned close enough that I could barely hear her whisper. My father never stayed after closing because he loved music. She looked toward the shelves. He stayed because he was secretly recording every private meeting held in this building. Above us, a heavy object scraped across the stage. Then Caleb's voice came again. Search every inch. If Sebastian finds the master recording, none of us walk away free. We didn't move. Not because we were trapped. Because every sound above us carried a decision. Heavy footsteps crossed the stage. Wood groaned beneath polished shoes. Someone dragged equipment aside. Caleb wasn't searching. He knew exactly where to look. Maya reached for my wrist before I could climb the stairs. For once. Don't solve this by walking toward the danger. I almost ignored her. That was the old version of me. The man who believed courage meant moving first. Instead, I listened. The silence that followed felt unfamiliar. And strangely stronger. We waited until the voices drifted toward the dining room. Only then did we examine the shelves. Hundreds of reel tapes. Every one dated. Every one catalogued by hand. Walter hadn't simply recorded music. He had archived conversations. Business dinners. Private celebrations. Closed-door meetings. The Blue Note had always looked like a restaurant. In reality, it had been the safest room in the city for powerful men who believed nobody was listening. Maya found an old ledger tucked beneath the recording console. Every tape had a reference number. Except one. A single line had been crossed out in black ink. Master session, removed. Removed. Not destroyed. Someone had taken only one recording. The only recording Caleb feared. A faint cough echoed from the staircase. We spun around. Walter stood there. Still wearing his old cardigan. Still holding his saxophone. His eyes wandered across the basement. Then settled on the shelves. I told them. His voice trembled. Music remembers. Maya hurried toward him. You shouldn't be here. He smiled gently. I forgot where my room was. Then, unexpectedly, he walked straight to an empty space on the far wall. He pressed his fingers against one loose brick. A soft click echoed. Another compartment opened. Inside rested a small metal case wrapped in faded blue cloth. Walter stared at it. I hid it. He frowned. For someone. His memories floated in and out like distant radio signals. I carefully opened the case. There was no real tape inside. Only a cassette. A handwritten label. For Sebastian. My breath caught. My name. Written decades before tonight. Before I could pick it up, the restaurant lights suddenly came alive. Power had been restored. The basement flooded with illumination. Too late. They knew where we were. Caleb's voice thundered from above. Seal every exit. Maya looked toward the narrow service tunnel at the back of the basement. There. We ran. Walter struggled to keep pace. Without thinking, I reached for him. He resisted. No. His grip tightened around my sleeve. You take her. The words stopped me. I can come back. He smiled with heartbreaking calm. Christopher. It was the clearest he had spoken all week. Your father carried everyone. Don't repeat his mistake. Then he gently placed the cassette into Maya's hands. She knows how to keep people alive. Not you. Her. The truth hurt because it was deserved. For years I had believed protecting people meant standing in front of every bullet. Walter understood something I never had. Sometimes protecting someone means trusting another person enough to lead. We escaped through the tunnel moments before men rushed into the basement. From the alley across the street, flames suddenly burst through the restaurant windows. Not an explosion. A deliberate fire. Old wood ignited within seconds. Decades of history disappeared behind walls of smoke. Maya collapsed to her knees. My father's music. Walter stood beside us, watching the building burn. No tears. Only quiet acceptance. They can burn the room. He looked toward the cassette still clutched in Maya's hands. But they forgot. The song already left with us. As fire engines screamed toward the blue note, I turned the cassette over. On the back, beneath my father's familiar handwriting, another sentence had been added. If you're hearing this, the man you trust most has already betrayed you. The cassette weighed almost nothing. Yet my hands had never carried anything heavier. Smoke drifted across the Chicago skyline as firefighters fought to save what remained of the blue note. The flames reflected in Maya's eyes, but she never looked away. She wasn't watching a building burn. She was watching 32 years of her father's life disappear. I wanted to promise I would rebuild it. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Can we still play it? She looked down at the cassette. If it's damaged. She couldn't finish the sentence. Walter quietly reached into his coat pocket and produced an old cassette recorder wrapped in faded cloth. I kept this. His voice was soft. For good music. Memory had abandoned him 1,000 times. Yet somehow, he had protected the one object capable of protecting everyone else. We drove to a lakeside cabin my father had once used as a retreat. No security. No staff. No advisors. Only the three of us. The cabin still smelled of cedar wood and old books. For years I had avoided this place because it reminded me too much of the man I believed had died a coward. Tonight. I wondered whether I had spent 2 decades hating the wrong version of him. Maya gently inserted the cassette into the recorder. No one spoke. The tape hissed. Then, my father's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, then I failed to stop what was coming. His tone was calm. Almost peaceful. I've hidden evidence inside music because powerful men rarely listen to songs they cannot control. Walter closed his eyes. He had heard these words before. Long ago. I don't know which of my friends will betray me. A long pause. But I know one of them will. My heartbeat slowed. If you're my son, don't waste your life hunting the man who pulled the trigger. Hunt the man who convinced everyone else to lower the gun. The distinction shattered everything I thought justice meant. Murder had been the final act. Betrayal had begun much earlier. The recording continued. I built an empire because I believed power protected family. I was wrong. It only taught family to protect power. Every word felt less like a confession, and more like an apology. Not for dying. For the life he had left me. I looked toward the fireplace. I became exactly what he feared. Maya didn't disagree. She sat beside me. Close enough that I could hear her breathing. You became what you thought surviving required. She spoke gently. Those aren't always the same thing. No one had ever corrected me without trying to shame me. She simply offered another way to see myself. That frightened me more than any enemy. Because I wanted to believe her. The tape clicked again. One final section remained. If Christopher is old enough to hear this, there's something he deserves to know. My chest tightened. The betrayal didn't come from business. It came from blood. Walter suddenly opened his eyes. No. His voice shook violently. No. The recorder continued anyway. The person who arranged the meeting that exposed me was my younger brother. Silence. Then my father's final words. Forgive him if you can. I couldn't. The tape ended. No dramatic music. No final explanation. Only the hollow click of empty reels. I stared at the silent recorder. My uncle had died 15 years earlier. He couldn't have orchestrated the fire. Which meant someone else had inherited his secrets. Someone still alive. Someone still inside my organization. My phone vibrated across the wooden table. One message. No sender. Only a photograph. It showed the cabin we were sitting inside, taken from outside the front window less than a minute earlier. Below it, a single sentence appeared. The cassette told you about the first betrayal. Now come meet the second. I looked at the photograph one last time. The cabin. Our cabin. Someone had been standing outside while we listened to my father's final confession. They wanted us to know we were never alone. The old version of me would have ordered every guard in my organization to lock down the county. Tonight. I did something different. I turned off my phone. Then I looked at Maya. What would you do? She seemed surprised that I was asking. Whoever sent that message wants you angry. I am. I know. She stepped closer. But anger is the only language they expect from you. Walter quietly watched us from his chair. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he began polishing his saxophone again. His hands remembered routines his mind could no longer explain. Sometimes healing looked exactly like that. Doing one gentle thing while the world fell apart. The message contained one hidden detail. A reflection in the cabin window. Not a face. A church steeple. I recognized it immediately. St. Gabriel's. The church stood across from the old music conservatory where my father had donated instruments every Christmas. No one connected that place to my family anymore. Which made it the perfect meeting point. I have to go. Maya reached for my coat before I could leave. You said I paused. You didn't say we. She wasn't accusing me. She was reminding me. For years I had carried every burden alone because I believed leadership meant isolation. I took a slow breath. We. A small smile appeared on her face. That's better. The conservatory had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Dust floated through shattered stained glass windows, coloring the floor with fractured blues and reds. Rows of forgotten pianos stood beneath white sheets. At the center of the recital hall, someone waited. Not Caleb. Not an armed rival. My chief financial officer. Richard Lawson. The man who had managed my books for 11 years. He didn't run. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply placed a leather folder on the piano. I wondered how long it would take. You forged my signatures. Yes. You hid acquisitions. Yes. You helped destroy the Blue Note. A brief hesitation. Yes. His honesty was almost insulting. Why? Richard slowly looked around the empty hall. Because your father was about to destroy everything we'd spent decades building. My father wanted to leave. He wanted to confess. Richard's voice sharpened for the first time. Thousands of families depended on those businesses. So you decided murder was cheaper than change? No. He closed his eyes. Your uncle made that decision. I made every decision afterward. The room became painfully quiet. I convinced myself I was protecting stability. His shoulders finally sagged. But after enough years, you stop protecting people. You start protecting lies. There it was. Not a monster. A man who had surrendered his conscience one compromise at a time. The most dangerous people rarely begin as villains. They begin as professionals who stop questioning themselves. Richard slid the folder toward me. Inside were original contracts. Wire transfers. Recorded approvals. Every forged signature. Every shell company. Enough evidence to dismantle everything. Take it. You could destroy it. I almost did. Why didn't you? His tired eyes drifted toward Maya. Because she kept serving Walter dinner every night. I frowned. What? I watched her for months. She never knew. She treated the man who could barely remember her with more loyalty than I've shown anyone in 20 years. He laughed bitterly. A waitress made me ashamed of the executive I'd become. Maya lowered her eyes. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Compassion had accomplished what fear never could. Sirens echoed outside. Not because someone called them tonight. Because 3 days earlier, I had quietly delivered anonymous financial records to federal investigators after deciding to stop hiding behind my own empire. Richard heard them too. It's over. No. I gently closed the folder. It can finally become honest. He nodded once. Then willingly walked toward the officers entering through the front doors. No chase. No violence. Only consequences. As investigators secured the evidence, Maya quietly looked toward the stage where children had once performed. I wish Walter could remember this. I took her hand without thinking. Not to rescue her. To steady myself. She didn't pull away. Before either of us spoke again, one detective approached holding another sealed envelope recovered from Richard's briefcase. It's addressed to you. In familiar handwriting. My mother's. Across the front she had written only one sentence. Open this after you learn the difference between saving an empire and saving a soul. I didn't open my mother's letter until the Blue Note was gone. The ashes had settled. The investigations had begun. The headlines had already decided who I used to be. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to control the story. I was trying to deserve a better ending. The envelope had yellowed with age. My mother's handwriting was as elegant as I remembered. She had written only one page. Christopher, one day you'll inherit two things. Power, And the temptation to mistake it for love. If someone fears you, they may obey. If someone trusts you, they may change you. Choose the second. Love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully. Not because it was fragile. Because I finally understood it. For 20 years I had believed my father failed because he chose conscience over control. Now I realized he had simply become the first man in our family brave enough to stop pretending power was the answer. Federal investigators dismantled the financial network over the following months. Richard Lawson accepted responsibility. Caleb Monroe pleaded guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and evidence destruction. The shell companies disappeared one by one. I signed every document requested. Answered every question. Surrendered every asset connected to the illegal structure. My attorneys called it reckless. My board called it corporate suicide. Maybe they were right. But every empire eventually asks one question. What survives after the money leaves? I finally had an answer. Character. The Blue Note was never rebuilt. Not as a luxury club. Not as another investment. The city declared the site a protected cultural landmark. Instead of constructing something new, we restored what had almost been erased. Old photographs returned to the walls. The original piano was repaired. Walter's burned saxophone was carefully restored and displayed beside the stage. Not as a museum piece. As a reminder. Some places deserve to keep telling their stories. Walter's memory continued to fade. Some mornings he believed he was 25. Some afternoons he asked Maya who she was. Yet every Thursday afternoon he still walked onto the restored stage with his saxophone. The music remained long after names disappeared. Watching him taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. Love isn't measured by how much someone remembers you. It's measured by how faithfully you remember them. Maya never corrected him. She simply introduced herself again. Every time. With the same smile. The same patience. The same grace. I once asked how she found the strength. She looked toward Walter. Because every introduction gives him another chance to feel safe. No negotiation I'd ever completed had required that much courage. Almost a year after the fire, we closed the restaurant together. Not because business was over. Because the night was. The chairs stood upside down on polished tables. The lights dimmed exactly as they had the evening we first met. Maya removed her elegant black server's apron and folded it with the same care I remembered. This time, there were no tears. Only peace. You know, she said softly, I never cried because I was losing my job. I know. I cried because I thought no one would remember why this place mattered. I looked around the quiet dining room. I almost became one of those people. But you didn't. No. I smiled. Because one waitress refused to let me buy my way out of listening. She laughed. The sound filled the empty room more completely than applause ever could. I reached for her hand. Not to rescue her. Not to promise forever. Simply because it finally felt honest. She intertwined her fingers with mine without hesitation. Outside, rain began falling again. Just like the night everything changed. People still ask me when my life turned around. They assume it happened when the investigations ended. Or when the truth about my father finally came out. They're wrong. It happened after closing time, when I saw a waitress crying alone, and, for the first time in my life, realized that the strongest thing a powerful man can do isn't offer money. It's stay long enough to ask. What happened? That question didn't just save Maya's future. It saved my soul.